far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
So welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. I'd like to thank you for joining us for our fireside chat entitled Self-Care During Turbulent Times. So welcome. I'm so pleased to introduce my two panelists, and I will start by introducing Dr. Carleen Wilson Mitchell. She's a registered midwife, a doctor of nursing practice, fellow of the American College of Midwives, who teaches midwifery. She's a midwife, an educator, a researcher, and a Black birth rights activist. Welcome. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy. What an amazing introduction. I'm so grateful to be here with our esteemed guests and the audience. And I know that some of you will be listening after this recording, and we hope that will be a resource of help and support for you in the future. It's just a fireside chat of aunties and grandmothers. I'm a grandmother and an auntie and a sister and a daughter and a granddaughter. And I'm very grateful for all the support and mentorship from the village that I've received. And I'm just giving back and sharing with all my brethren.
Thank you. And I'm going to introduce another amazing, dynamic sister. And please, I'd like to introduce Caris Ann Clark Glasgow. She's an entrepreneur born in Guyana, South America. She migrated to Canada at an early age with her 4 siblings. As the oldest of 5 children, Caris learned at an early age the importance of choice, sharing, and staying motivated. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the community. I want to thank 100 ABC Women and the co-authors for giving us this opportunity and making a way for others. I personally have benefited from being in this community and hoping to maintain this community. And we're going to share a little more as we discuss the topic today. But for our guests, I would invite you all to take a look at not only this fireside chat, but the past fireside chats. You may have missed some really good stuff during the COVID and look forward to future engagement.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm so excited. I am Kathy McDonald. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm a trustee at the Peel District School Board. And I can tell you that there have been turbulent times in education. And I can appreciate the importance of self-care. In fact, often when I preach about self-care, people would say, remind me, hey, practice what you preach, right? So it's so important. And I tell you, I'd like to start by reflecting on this pandemic, right? This event that changed history, changed our way of life. The pandemic have left Black professionals and students drained. How can you propose that they should sustain themselves and remain resilient? So, Carleen, I'd like to start with you if you could.
I'd be happy to share. And as we're talking about preaching and teaching, I'm preaching to myself. I have been teaching as a midwife educator at Toronto Metropolitan University since 1992. And then prior to that, I had been working in the United States in Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia. And I've also had the privileges of traveling as a consultant educator to have workshops in South Sudan, Tanzania, Burundi. And while I'm there in all of these countries, I'm there to help people achieve some of their goals to be competent as clinicians, as midwives, as nurses, as physicians, to be able to work equitably with their clients, and then also to work equitably in the healthcare system that they find themselves in. And what we found is that the pandemic affected all of us so negatively. It drained us mentally. We had to use all of our smarts to try to figure out and make clinical decisions that were quite complex with a scarcity of resources. And what ends up happening sometimes when you put people in a box and there's limited amount of food, they start to fight against each other instead of working together for the common good. And, our ancestral traditional ways of working together, knowing and understanding our place in the universe comes from our African ancestral ways of doing things. And so that whole idea of having a village that you're connected to, that gives you your value, gives you a reason to live, gives you your purpose in the universe, that spiritual, social, emotional, mental support that comes from being part of a family. And that family might be, because we called everybody auntie when I was growing up, whether they were biologically related to you or not. You need aunties, you need grandmothers, you need grandpas, you needed trusted people who, when the rest of the world is gaslighting you and saying you're not enough, you're not doing well, they're not there giving you positive reinforcement, but they're right there to criticize you. You need your group of people, your family, your neighborhood, your community that is going to give you resource. So don't, one of the things I realized I had to teach students and I had to teach myself was having boundaries. There has to be time when I spend time with family, when I spend time with, whether it's even by WhatsApp, because sometimes you couldn't be together. You have to find creative ways of connecting, whether it's by FaceTime or whatever it is. And then those who you do have in person in the home, you have to make time. That means you're not working 60 to 70 hours a week, even when you're tempted. You're working the number of hours that you're paid to work, and you're working smart. So we learned a lot of tools, a lot of IT tools to make our work easier. And we found out what's really important and what's not. And we're not really good at that as healthcare providers. We actually need folks like Karis who can organize time and organize people. And that's the corporate world. They're very good at making teams and making them work effectively. That's not our strength in the healthcare industry. And sometimes even in education and academia, we somehow seem like we're going to climb Everest every single day instead of finding, maybe there's an airplane that will get you up to Everest. You don't have to do it the hard way. So I learned how to connect with folks in the community who could do something better than I could, and I could delegate or I could share something with them. And it was always helpful to have their eyes giving me feedback. That was how we got through it.
Yeah. So Caress, as the airplane that helps us instead of making us do the trek to Everest, what do you suggest?
I agree with you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. I agree. We have to make choices and we need partners. And this is 100 ABC opportunity, a community that will help redirect us. I mean, you're looking at the big mountain, but you need somebody that's going to tell you which route is shorter and safer to climb that mountain. And sometimes it does mean stepping back, analyzing a few routes. It may not happen right now, but deciding when is the best time to start. When do we want to forge ahead? And we do need a community. Not dismissing the men, but these aunties and sisters and grandmas are still amazing. And we as a group need to figure out ways to expand and share our responsibilities so that those future climbs, future tasks, we hope we never have another pandemic, but we're having other turbulent things happening. And we need to allow ourselves to say, not now, later.
Yeah.
No, fill ourselves up first. I've learned that the hard way. And it's costs a lot more than I was willing to give up. And I like the word give up because it's not a bad thing. It's recognizing that it is not going to be progressive to go ahead. So I've in the last 2 years appreciate the opportunity to stop, pause, and reapply.
Absolutely. Chris, I got goosebumps listening to you because I lost a very, very close friend during the pandemic, not because of COVID, but because of the trauma of fighting for the rights of Black children. And his name is Kolo Idiomade. Rest in peace, Brother Kolo. And it's not ironic that, he actually got a brain bleed whilst typing a delegation to the board. That's how traumatic this work is. And that for me was a loud alarm bell to the importance of sometimes I would just walk away, turn off my cell phone and just shut it out because you absolutely need it. Because I'm acutely aware that, people, my husband probably will be financially better off when he cashes in the life insurance. My children may miss actually the physical mom, and I think, he will get a few phone calls for about a month and 1 or 2 reads, but then after that, life goes on, right? We're not indispensable. Yeah. And it is so important to remind ourselves of that because the world will go on with or without us. So, speaking of turbulent times, we have things like climate change, food insecurities, housing crisis, increasing racism, extreme politics. And I'll start with you again, Carlene. Can you speak to some of these events and these turbulent times? Yeah.
Yeah, now that we were just getting back on our feet and the healthcare system and things are opened up again, and we have some more digital tools and whistles and apps to play with, now the war in the Middle East. And the way it's affected us is that it's really cutting across racial lines. It's not just a religious war, it is a racial war. It's being sensed that way by my students, by my colleagues who have friends and family who are being hurt on both sides. And, at the university, we try to be professional. You try to separate the state from religion. You try to, we're here to learn about saving lives and delivering health care. But when you walk in the room, your heart, your history, your identity walks in the room with you. One of the things that I really suggest to folks, of course, you're going to be having contact with your community to help you when the grief and the loss is happening. But some of us will sort of derail all of our other plans to get an education, to get a job done, to launch a course. There was a course that I wanted to launch about Black birthing and health equity. It was something our students were asking for many, many years, and we wanted to represent our African diasporic ways of knowing in our curriculum. And I could easily have had that derail or other things derail because you're putting out fires or you think you need to be the person to save everybody. I'm not Superwoman. I lost my cape a long time ago. And I had to say to some of my students, there are some things that are very, very important to you. You may think that you need to lead a protest. You may think that you may need to lead a very aggressive protest. It could cost you your degree. It could cost you your license to practice or your registration. It could cost you your reputation. If it's worth it, it is the hill to die on. You will give up all those things in order to make your voice be known. If your voice is that important, there's some people whose voices are extremely important, and I'm glad that they gave up everything. Martin Luther King was one of them. There are many people that I admire today who are part of, that cloud of witnesses that is looking down on me today. I have to decide, though, this broken world that I'm living with, even if I'm in an institution where some of the leaders, I'm wondering, where do their politics lie? Maybe I need to just get my degree, my piece of paper, and then once I finish riding this leaky boat to the other shore, I'll get off of this leaky boat with my degree and I will build a cruise liner. Right now, I don't have a cruise liner. I have a leaky boat called a racist healthcare system, a racist academic system. I have job structures where people are being blocked because of the amount of melanin in their skin and their phenotype instead of being treated based on their character and their knowledge. And we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing people blocked from going into a legal institution as a new lawyer to article. We're seeing people blocked from getting a job in a hospital because they were put on a list because maybe they signed a petition and it's all over Facebook, all over social media. So I had to say to students, I really want you to be one of the change agents of the future. I am hoping that you will have a career, that you will be able to deliver one of my grandbabies. I don't want a racist person to deliver my grandbaby. I want you to deliver my grandbaby. I want you to survive. Let's try to get as far as we can on this leaky boat and get your degree and then have the power to change things. Not only to change one interaction with one person, but to change policies that tell people how to do their jobs, that change the curriculum for a university so that when the next generation is learning, they're going to learn equity, because equity is not intuitive. It must be learned. It's a learned behavior. People learn how to be racist as children. Growing up, they're socialized that way. To undo it, yes, it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of very evidence-based work based on research that works. We know we can make a difference in the way healthcare is delivered. It can become more equitable. We can stop Black mothers and babies from dying unnecessarily, and they are dying. We just aren't counting them in Canada. We're counting it in the United States. We're counting it in the UK. We're counting it in Australia. Canada is the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have race-based health data. We didn't know how many Black people were dying in COVID because we didn't count until a couple of brave medical students at Women's College Hospital dared to defy their professor, and they did the research. Then we found out we were dying in greater numbers. So sometimes find the right cause, find a cause that's going to help build the movement, because this is not just a short battle. This is a long-term war. So that's where getting advice from your elders and people in the community who know better about strategy and tactics, that's where we can really fight the racism that is propelling what's going on in the war in the Middle East. It's not always going to be by a protest in your classroom.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And so, Carez, we have patched, we have gotten off the leaky boat. We're on our cruise liner, right? And so during a crisis of oppression and violence, it seems that these things increase. How can we begin to dismantle racism in institutions where we work?
Again, and Dr. Carleen says it, no aggression, little aggression, more strategy, clear partnership, and maintaining, developing, and securing the boundaries related to our plan.
Mhm.
Simple. That's what Dr. Carleen said in all those words. We have to strategize. We have to be reserved with the aggression, focus on the plan, and then look back and build. Because you cannot build in a fire. You have to wait for the fire. You have to wait for this storm to be over, to establish what's left and what resources we can use to build. And I feel honored, and I feel like I feel like I'm doing something right by stepping back, aside, away, with the intent to look back and rebuild. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carleen, I'd ask you to answer that question too, because often it seems like, especially when you're doing anti-racism work, anti-Black racism work, where you're trying to dismantle these systems in housing, in food insecurities, in healthcare, in policing, in the justice system. And it almost seems as every 2 steps you make, you almost go back 3 steps, right? And that frustration. So how exactly, so, a lot of people say, well, I've been patient. I think I'm being strategic, but, I've waited out the fire, and they get that frustration. So how can you encourage and motivate people?
That is such a great question, Kathy. What do you do while you're waiting for the fire for the embers to go down and for you to have a clear way to rebuild? And how do you wait? Because even though you may not be letting out the aggression, the violence is happening to you. It's happening to your mind, your psyche, your emotions. You need a safe person to be with, to emote, to just cry, to scream, to get angry. You need those safe people. I think you need 5 good friends. They had a research study that there was there was a fire in Chicago. How did people who survived the Chicago fire, how did they survive? They had 5 good friends. They had, the cheerleader type who loves you and is always saying good things about you, who's always like the cup is half full. You need someone you can just cry with, and they'll give you a cup of tea, or they'll give you some chamomile tea. You'll need the person who's going to bring you to have a cup of coffee or have a movie or go dancing or go and exercise. You need a different group of people. And then you need someone who's going to be a timekeeper and say, listen, you need to start studying for this exam, or listen, you need to finish that letter. I know you wanted to write that letter of resignation and you don't know how to write it. Just start writing. Just write anything, So one of the things I realized I needed was cognitive therapy. We can even do it ourselves. And many of us go to, counselors, and they tell you what to do. Fine, I know what to do, but how's my body going to do it? How is my body going to walk in there and present? Or how am I going to go for this interview? Or how am I going to, in the meeting where they're going to talk about different suggestions for solving a problem? And I have a suggestion that is basically radical that says you need to stop being racist, and that equals A, B, and C. Like, how do you calm your fears? How do you stop feeling like the imposter syndrome? How do you handle the fact that you have to go to work and you've got two brothers in the hospital with severe cardiac problems, respiratory problems? True story. How do you go back to work? How do you serve? There doesn't seem to be anything left in you. And that's where it comes to getting counseling that is really geared to help someone who is of the African diaspora. We have suffered some post-slavery traumatic syndrome. When we have our fight and flight, it is directly related to those epigenetic stressors that have changed our blood pressure, changed the way our cortisone and our epinephrine works. That is why that's the theory, why we have higher rates of cardiac disease, why we possibly have more preeclampsia and hypertension in pregnancy. It is why we're dying of strokes and aneurysms. It is why we have so much diabetes. Our whole immune system has been affected by the weathering generation after generation, and then we inherit those genes that give directions to say, fight when there's no fire. But you've been so used to running, as soon as there's a little bit of stress, your stressors go overboard, your response. And so one of the researchers I've been looking at recently and actually participating in some of their group therapy that they do is Dr. Resma Menakem. It's Menakem. This is a psychotherapist who worked with the Afghanistan soldiers when they came back, or people who are paramedics or police, and they're going through this PTSD and their whole bodies are quaking and they have like nervous tics, or something happens and they just freeze. Like that happens to a lot of us. We just freeze. We don't know why. We know what we're supposed to do, but we can't make ourselves do it. Or we're taking out all our frustration on our children or our spouses. And why can't we stop this behavior? Because it's not cognitive. We actually need to help someone help us to calm down and actually feel safe. There's a science behind that. It's not just a kumbaya moment. It's actually having therapy over a few months to physically help your biofeedback mechanisms to say, why is my body twitching like that? Why is my neck tensing? Why am I stiffening up in my chest and I can hardly breathe? And then through some of the therapy, sometimes you find out, oh, you had an ancestor who actually, was hung. There's quaking, there's echoes of that experience in your DNA. You don't even know why. And why does this make sense? Because as African peoples, we don't look at our world in a two-dimensional way. The Eurocentric Western European model that tells us it's scientific is we have no spiritual part of us. When you're dead, you're dead. You're just a little bit of dust. But in the African ways of knowing, we have a mind and a soul and emotions. We have a body and we have the herbs and some of the natural traditional methods to treat them. Some of those herbs are now in medication that you can buy for lots of money, or you can talk to an herbologist and get the natural thing. And I'm talking about more than marijuana tea and marijuana CBD oil. There's a lot more than that, right? So we've got the mind and the body, but the spiritual. The spiritual, we believe, is deep within ourselves. And the African indigenous peoples, every one of us on the face of the earth have had indigenous ancestors. Some of them continue to live today. We're fortunate. But some of those ways of healing, that's what I find has helped me. And it comes from within our community. There are more and more of those kinds of somatic therapists available for us.
Thank you so much for that. So, Perez, speaking of ways of healing, in a lot of us in our Black culture, in our African cultures, in our Caribbean cultures, therapy is taboo. That some people would talk about the cost factor or even the time factor. I've been told by people, oh, I don't have time to go to therapy, right? And some people are even cynical. Oh, it's a waste of time. It's not going to do anything. How do you and what do you say to people like that, with that mindset?
My personal policy, I try to look at, I will only tell you to do what I do. And if you're in an economical situation to do more, I allow you, I suggest so. But the first thing is self. Dr. Carlene, talk about our spiritual growth, our spiritual health, remembering our ancestor, respecting and honoring those energies and opportunity. I don't have access to a psychotherapist. I've never explored. And listening to you, yes, I experience all those stressors. But because I have learned, and this is through self reading and research, to breathe, step back. And I found the most powerful thing for us is to say no when we're not comfortable. And while saying no and stepping back, be accountable, build relationships with people you trust, and follow your instinct. We have instincts, and we disconnect from all the madness. In our silent time, it comes to us. We have more power than we believe. And we need to stop giving that away to triggers. Dr. Carlene, I wish I had personal contact with you. I mean, I have great contact.
Well, we will.
But in my last few months, I have been through grief, change, trauma, physical, emotional, and mental. And I find a book. Thank you for the internet. I go read, I check. I really am very cautious. Why? Because now I'm a little more concerned with people's idea of, oh, you should know better, because I've heard that. Oh, you're so smart. That shouldn't bother you. Oh, you have a husband. You shouldn't be worried about that. Oh, you have great children. But that it's not all about me. I still believe and want to trust my community. So when my circle starts speaking like that, I recognize that you're in my circle, but we do not have the same vision and goal. So to wrap that up, I still believe in partnership. I really value mentorship. And I would like to get back to being, I'm accountable to me, my choice, my decision, my opinions, but I want to be able to build trust so that we can pass it on to the next generation. We are losing as Afro-Indian communities because of society. We're losing. But if we can sit back as a planner and strategize, build again, and come, like you said, finish what you started, figure out its value, and build on it. That's all I'm doing, one step at a time. I teach my 2 children that. And as I said, I'm embracing change. It's a little scary, but I still trust a few people I have access to.
And thank you for that. Because, you know, when I was listening to both of your comments, the last set of comments there, I was thinking that, especially around issues around anti-Blackness, anti-Black racism, because of course, oh my goodness, I'm not racist, right? It's only in the US, in Canada, oh my goodness. So how do you, Carlene, when everyone seems to be overly sensitive in the workplace and the classroom, you know, and it has become a place where Black bodies are policed, and I would say hyper surveilled, especially in our education system. We have the language, but something we have to be very careful that we're not politically incorrect, right? Especially if it surrounds Indigenous issues or the current Middle East conflict. How would it be ever culturally safe for opinions to be expressed, for ideas to be exchanged, you know, without being canceled?
That's such a great point, Kathy. And especially for those who are young in their careers, early in their careers, or even those of us who are changing careers. There's some of us in our 50s who are deciding to go back to school. And here we have, you know, these millennials and Generation X folks who have a different language. They use different vocabulary. It takes a lot of humility, and it also takes even preparing your listeners to say, I'm going to say something. If I make some mistakes, please have the grace and the generosity to listen. I welcome your feedback. I'm really looking forward from hearing how I could say it better. but this is the only way I know how to say it right now. I'm just going to let you know that I don't intend to be hurtful and I don't intend to be harmful. This person that I live with, and we're both of Jamaican heritage, we call each other husband and wife. That's what we call each other because that's part of our worldview. It's part of our spiritual view. It's part of us showing loyalty to each other in a culture in Jamaica where baby mother is easier to say rather than wife, rather than spouse, rather than you're my lifelong partner. And so when I come into the room and I'm going to be talking in our discussion, in our classroom discussion, I'm going to use that term. However, it doesn't mean I have to use that term for this other group if they want to be called partners. That's what they like to be called. That's part of their culture. But this is what I call this person who we have promised till death do us part. And so I found I have to practice almost prefacing what I say. I've even really valued having the chance to get coaching, have other people give me feedback and say, when you look at me and you hear me, is it welcoming? Is it drawing you in? Is it calling you out instead of calling you in? Is it an engendering trust? When I speak and I share it this way, am I actually giving you the right impression? The impression is that we're trying to learn together. We're trying to have an intellectual partnership together. It's been challenging to go from the United States or from Europe or from Africa and then come to Canada, a country that does police language. Everyone does it. It's really sad. It's I don't know if it's sort of a vestige of our British colonialism, but it's important for us to practice with each other and practice with our kids at the kitchen table, practice having these intellectual discussions. It's part of our legacy. If you go under a baobab tree in Kenya, you'll find a group of people under the tree. They might be cooking or doing something with vegetables or nuts and talking and sharing stories. And I love the way their voice, the cadence of their voice is. It's almost poetical, you know, it's musical. And I realize when we're anxious, we come across as fierce female warriors. I realize that in myself. You know, I'm very tall. I walk into a room. When I'm in South Sudan, no problem. Everybody else is 5'11". But I walk into a room of, you know, my peers who might be shorter than I am, they really get frightened very easily of Black skin, of a big, Black, powerful woman. I even notice they get frightened of a short, Black, powerful, confident woman. They don't seem to be as frightened when you're the maid or the housekeeper, but when they found out that you actually have a position of leadership or, you know, you actually belong there, they get frightened. Now, we can't live to assuage white guilt. You know, we have to be who we are, but we can learn language that might help to translate so that when they see the next Black person, they'll say, I can actually be safe with that Black person. I don't have to be afraid of them. They actually often react in fear. That's how I handle it.
Thank you for that. And Perez, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just learned how to ask for grace because I am that person. I'm not tall. I'm not big. I am a little something, but if you are engaging with me, you will feel the impact. I am learning and I will remember to ask for grace as I strategize my delivery. I will continue to try to personally develop, but asking for grace is different because then I am not going to be apologetic for being authentic. I still want to have people around me that I can trust. I want to hold me accountable. We are not concerned about the others. We have to stay concerned about our goal. My new piece is going to be, and I will read my crowd, feel my audience, ask for grace as I'm about to deliver because I believe in inclusion. I believe because I think that is the only way to empower the people around us. I come from a very diverse family, both economically, educationally, and racially. I can fit into any race. I know about wealth. I know about lack. And I need to be able to stay authentic. I'm not trying to climb that mountain because heart attack, stroke, and aneurysm is a thing. Do it properly with the right support system. Thank you.
Yeah, wow. That I got goosebumps because in my role, I know, and that's going to be my big takeaway, Carlene, to before I start, preface everything and ask for grace, right? Because I know that there are times when it's hard for my brain to understand how people cannot see the humanity in Black bodies, Black children. I'm particularly focused on education in this point. And I find it, so I have come across incidences where I feel that when I leave the room, like I need self-care immediately, or I feel like I'm just going to get a stroke. I can literally feel the same tensing of the body. You can feel things squirming in your head, because you can't understand how, a person would look on a sweet 4-year-old and tell them it's going to be a future gang leader, or how somebody could tell you they don't want Black boys in their math club. And I can't see, and people say often try and see the intentions, good intentions of people. I just am incapable of understanding how people could say that, like trustees can say, oh, it's heartwarming to hear these stories of what the Black students are going through. To me, it's pain porn. So I try to, navigate, okay, am I being overly sensitive? Am I overreacting? Because I find sometimes some of the reactions of educators shocking, So I think for me, I'm probably not the most diplomatic, but I try to be as diplomatic as I think without losing my sense of self, because I have to be authentic. And I don't think that, you may be a sensitive person, but I also think it's important that they understand truth and be held accountable for some of their actions. And again, I try to, as I navigate what I consider some very racist, and even now, I think, and I'd like for you ladies to both comment on this, that we have this summer of the George Floyd where everybody seemed to have been awoke to all the, atrocities and trauma of, having Black skin in this world. And, there are people, oh my goodness, they're in solidarity. We had allies, we had accomplices, we had co-conspirators, we had all manner of people. And now it seems like everybody has disappeared, and it's almost like a backlash. And people are like, oh, all these Black people are getting too much. They're getting jobs, or they got appointed. And, some people got appointed who shouldn't be appointed. But that's another topic for another day. But I mean, it's almost as if there is a backlash, right? And it even heightens the need for self-care, because that frustration of, oh my goodness, everything is going back. You think you're in a time warp, and you just see things eroding before your eyes. So, and I'm sure in your profession, I'm sure it's the same thing in healthcare. You see it, So how do you practice like self-care, during this? So it's not only turbulent times, but it's turbulent times sort of in reverse, right?
Yeah, I've even had people say things. I've even had students say things like, this is a reverse racism. This is, like affirmative action gone wild. Like, making statements completely inaccurate, but just tell me how biased they are. even though we might be in a profession that's a helping profession, and even though we might be teachers, for example, you think it's such a lofty, high moral kind of, duty that surely everybody is thinking the same way, but they are a result of how they were socialized. And there might be a little veneer there, you've been taught how to say things the right way, but you can only keep it up for so long. Um, I think I have to decide that there are going to be a few people who are going to want to be just, and they're going to want to be fair, and they want to continue learning and growing, lifelong learning. If that's, someone, of course, came here in the family, in the society, and were in the culture that they came in. But if they have the ability and the desire to learn, I can work with you. But if I'm in a group of people, or I'm in a department that isn't even willing to say, we're not where we need to be, I want to learn. It's not going to happen overnight, but I want to start the journey. Then we can have workshops. We can bring people in for lunch and learns. We can, whenever something comes up, like you're writing something together, and then somebody wants to write something as you're working on the team to write something, and you say, no, we can't say it that way because that's racist. We can't use that term. That's a code word for racism. And if they're willing to be open, and you give them a reference to say, there's a whole body of knowledge that says that word is a racist word, don't use it in that paper, in this thing that we're doing together. If they listen, great. But if I'm hitting my head against a brick wall or a glass ceiling for, a year, 5 years, 10 years, maybe it's time to leave that institution. I've done all that I can. I have maybe encouraged or enlightened a couple people, and maybe it's time for me to leave and go somewhere else. So I also pray a lot. I am a woman of faith, and I realize that there's some things that are impossible for me to do. It's going to take something divine and supernatural. And yes, I'm a divine agent, yes, but maybe I'm needed strategically somewhere else. And it's not my skill set to, maybe I planted the seeds, somebody else is going to follow. Now, somebody might say, and I heard this from a colleague of mine at Toronto Metropolitan University, Camille Grace Monroe, who Dr. Monroe is just an amazing friend and, I guess, compatriot, I have to say. But she said, growing up, on her grandmother's farm in Jamaica, her grandmother would plant the seeds in all kinds of soil, and then they would have crops. And then after working so hard, and she supplied food for the rest of the community too, she was so generous. But sometimes people would come at night and steal some of the fruits or the vegetables, like they're stealing the mangoes, they're stealing the breadfruit, and she said, Grandma, they're stealing all your stuff. Aren't you worried? She says, well, I'm glad it's feeding people who are hungry. At least it was useful. And it doesn't matter, whether they paid for it or not. I grew it to help people stay alive. It's okay. So we may be thinking, I'm putting all this work in this institution, in this job, in this place. Is any of it going to take root? Is it going to grow? Yes, it will. Maybe not, in 1 year or 2 years. Maybe long after you leave that job, what you planted will grow. And it's true. You fed some people who were really hungry, who got it the right way, who were thankful, who started to change the way they did things in that job, or not. And then there's other people who you're thinking, will they ever learn? Because they never did change. But it's okay. It's okay. It was still worth it to pour your heart, your ideas, your strategies into that project. Somebody will benefit. And I have faith. I really do have faith that when I plant that seed, it will grow. I believe that. There's always
Wow.
going to be a harvest. That's like a universal principle. It's like gravity. E equals MC squared. You plant that seed, it will grow. I'm not the only one watering it. I don't provide the sunshine, but it will grow.
Mhm. Wow, those are amazing words because, probably as you say, sometimes you just have to move on, and you planted the seed and let it grow, and let the other gardeners tend to the
Mhm,
seed, right?
mhm.
So, Perez, how do you not give up for self-care? So you're in this trying to make a change, and you realize that you have either, you don't want to go because you feel you have work to do or it's not time to go. But whilst you're in the trenches, you have to take care of yourself. Do you have any suggestions for?
I pray too, even in the loudest crowd. I am praying. I'm better now at tapping in and keeping that spiritual fire burning. Um, Planting the seeds, tilling the soil. Because if we don't plant those seeds, and if those thieves don't steal the crop, our seeds will only stay here. So plant it, allow it to grow, allow the fruit to grow, and allow them to steal it. Because guess what? They're finding us all over the world. If not us, something attached to us. So for me, practicing self-care, even when it is not possible, is just thanking
Mhm.
the Heavenly Father, thanking us ancestors for opportunity,
Yes.
for space. I
Yes.
thank him for you guys before I even met you.
Oh, thank you.
I
Thank you.
asked my elders that I haven't met to open doors. I can't explain this all to you, but
Mhm.
staying focused, remembering what from where we came, and keeping our goals available to be reviewed, to be changed, to shift, strategizing, building and severing relationships that may or may not support our goal. But the ultimate thing is to till the soil, whether we do it as one or all, plant the seeds, whether we do it as one or all, it doesn't matter where they're planted. Plant it where we show up and allow it to grow so the greedy thieves can have it and they will regret their action or they'll join us.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I
Simple.
love it. Well, I'm going to shift. I love it. I'm going to shift gears a bit. So, mortgage rates, interest rates on homes are extremely high and it's causing housing insecurity. People are losing their homes and Black people are losing their homes at faster rates. How do you suggest that we deal with this housing crisis, especially in the Black community, who, and we are severely impacted by this? And I
You
can tell
know,
you, I've come across a lot of unhoused youth. It's traumatic for them. It's hard to learn when you have to worry about where you're sleeping at night, right? So, Carleen, would you like to
you
start?
know, I'm going to be, it's true confessions time. Um, we were brought up, and this is actually planned. It's marketed. It's part of the way, things are sold and marketed on television and everywhere. We think that we need more than we really need. We think we need a bigger apartment. We think we need our own apartment. Maybe we should be sharing the apartment. Maybe we should get as many people in that one house as we can. Maybe, even though it's going to step on our toes a little bit longer, maybe we should stay home with mom and dad or with mom and our siblings in the house a little bit longer. Yeah, maybe we're 35 years old and we're still living at home. Yes, and we're saving our money for that house. Okay, we don't have to run on our own and be independent. That is actually a lie. That's a deception. You hear of many cultures in which it's part of the culture. It's ingrained in you that you've got to really sort of live like a new immigrant and have all 10 or 15 people in this big house, and you stay in that big house and you help each other. You take turns looking after the children, cooking, cleaning. You work as, a unit. And you have to sort of cope with the differences in personalities and the fact that one person's neat and the next person's sloppy, but you have something that binds you together that is stronger than the differences that could pull you apart. And sometimes we just have to swallow our pride, make the priority be the future, and not just be so some of us, I guess, we need immediate gratification. We need the big bling. We need the car. We need the this. And I suffer the same way. I think if we can think of some creative ways of cohabitation and saving our money, if we could start some, home-based businesses to help each other so that we're gaining additional revenue, if we could sort of collectively, use all of our resources, I think we could save. For those of us who have family back home, like during the hurricane right now, and I'm thinking of family members and then some of those that we've sort of adopted and that are helping, it's sort of hard to know who to help, how far to spread the money. And you have to be decisive. There's only going to be one person I'm helping right now because I can't afford to help 20. I'm only going to help that one person. Maybe as a group, we can, pool resources and send a barrel, but I know personally what my limitations are. And saving that money and organizing your budget is important. So the difficulty with housing and the racism that you realize that you're going to be only located in a certain neighborhood that doesn't have resources. It's a food desert. There's not a lot of healthy stuff there. That is real. If we could find some way of, accessing better housing, maybe in some of those condominiums where they now have to have some of the designated condos for lower income. And, that's what they did in the Daniels Project downtown in Toronto in Regent's Park. But it's gonna take a lot of effort with all of us working together to secure housing for ourselves because nobody else is going to do it for us.
Mhm. I hear you. And, I think of, for example, the food bank. Food banks don't have enough food to give out these days. Many of our Black community rely on the food bank for food.
Yes.
We have working members of our community because, people think of the food bank and they think of unemployed, people destitute, relying on a food bank. But we have many working families that
Yes.
are relying on food banks. We have lost lots of jobs in Canada last month. I assume this month is going to be similar. Things are getting worse. How can we support the Black community who is the most impacted? Keres?
I feel the need to maintain the efforts to help our people to, one, remember integrity. Our integrity. We have to go back to being selfless.
Mhm.
There, as a child, I felt it was okay to knock on a community door. My mom sent me to get some sugar. We don't have that anymore. Pride has removed the ability to be inclusive. We have to learn to be selfless, be more willing to share and listen for that doorbell to ring and somebody say, I just need a cup of sugar.
Yeah.
We still have those opportunities, but mentally we have removed it. We've become so proud. We're in Canada. We're supposed to be this. We're big shots. Like I'm listening to Dr. Caroline talk about who are we going to help? But you remember when one barrel fed a village.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law, rest in peace, I used to send barrels twice a year, Easter and Christmas. And some of the people I don't know, she just passed away. And I just met those people after 39 years.
Wow.
39 years. Just
and some of us, we can't do it all by ourselves. We can, the church, the temple, or the mosque that we are members of, gather as group and collect everything as a group and make sure everybody in your community is taken care of. I know many of our churches actually are taking in many of the homeless right now. They're new immigrants, refugees. They were promised housing that hasn't happened. And so the churches are taking them in. And your building is becoming like a shelter for at least some shelter in the night,
Cover. Yeah. So
and the government is actually reimbursing them for the effort. So there are government programs, there are grants that are either federal, provincial, or municipal. Amongst us, we're going to need to get some great grant writers to write those grants to be able to support some of our charitable organizations to be able to do the work to help with housing and food insecurity. But the money sometimes goes unspent for that year. They don't give it all away. So let's start writing those grants to get some of those dollars to support our community and swallow our pride and be willing to share.
Yeah, continue sharing because I was saying the housing it's gotten to housing, but I remember when it was just being able to provide a meal. So that is out of my whole spectrum. I'm still trying to figure out how that happened. I mean, we have our own home. We are actually able to live with all or none. I'm still able to maintain my home. The mortgage rate is not affecting me presently because we were always conservative even when we had excess. So again, my introduction was about becoming knowledgeable and making choices because choices have consequences. And I still believe that. We still have to make choices and think about the future. We have to delay the gratification. And I think I am living it. I am benefiting it because as an entrepreneur, I did really, really well, but I did not consume everything every day. I always think of my reserve, my sustenance, and my ability to last through the drought. So I really pray and hope that my sisters, brothers, and community can tap into the right persons, because it is persons now. The institutions and the organizations don't really care to hear from us. That's my view. We have a group here of women that are able to make change and move some walls and build some boundaries. So again, accountable, trust, and let's work on a goal and a plan. We can do little, what did they do back in the days? Little communities. One did peas, one did rice, once or twice a year they did share the meat. We don't need to eat steak every day.
Yeah.
Salt is not good for us, neither is sugar.
Yeah, yeah. And listening to both of you a while ago reminded me of the importance of community, of the village. We started off talking about the importance of the village. And I think a lot of us have lost our way in North America. I think that traditionally, if in our DNA, we are a communal people. We are not individual. Some societies are more individualistic than others. And I think African or Caribbean cultures, we are more communal, and we have lost that sense of the elders and the community teaching us, enlightening us, because I heard so many pearls of wisdom, making money and not spending it all, right? So in time of plenty, you put away for the lean times, also living, this whole notion of, you don't need, a mansion to raise your kids. And you don't have to keep moving up and just getting in more debt when you have money. But I think a lot of that information and sharing of that knowledge has been lost. And we need, in my opinion, to get back to more of these community groups so we can pass on that information. And even I think a lot of the excess spending and the excess is a sign of insecurity and trauma that a lot of us as a community have gone through. And we think that we need to show and wear on our sleeves all that we have to show that we are people and to validate us, right? And I think that we need to get back to the whole notion of self, being confident. I think the whole notion of passing on and accumulating wealth for our children, investing in our children, and I have so many stories when I look at other communities, in terms of how they prioritize education. And I know in the Black culture, we're people of education. I remember, in Jamaica growing up, we'd say that, labor for learning before you grow old, because learning is better than silver and gold. Silver and gold will vanish away, but a good education will never decay. And that was drilled into us, right? Yeah. And I think somehow we have lost sight of it, right? And if you look at the stats, even how our second and third generation Black immigrant families are doing, we're actually doing worse than the first generation. And for almost every other community, it's the reverse. You do better than the generation that came before, right? And I think we need some kind of a community reckoning, so to speak. And yeah.
Yeah, I asked a young lady yesterday when we were gathered together actually at a wedding, and I said, I'm really trying to understand why millennials and Generation X are feeling so not really entitled, that's not the word, but that they lack trust of the baby boomer generation. So in the past, you would consider your elders someone to trust and to confide in and get advice from, and they're uneasy about that. And she was saying, from what she understood, they felt that we betrayed them, that here we were given, you know, the economy of the world to take care of, and we blew it. 2008, 2010, the economy crashed. They're looking at what's going on now in the world and saying, you guys made so many mistakes, and yet we looked up to you. It looks like we can't really trust you. And so I said, what do we have to do to help them to trust us again? She said, it takes time, relationship building, that slow, constant, interactive, back and forth relationship building. What is that? It's family. It's always having the patience to assume that this relationship is going to last. I'm not running away. I love you unconditionally. Sometimes it's going to be hard, but we're in it together. And so I'm thinking, if we're building that relationship with humility, admitting we've made some weird mistakes, we haven't made the world a better place for them. We've made it a very puzzling, complex, fearful world. It's not all our fault. I mean, I'm not going to take that on, but I'm going to say, yes, I agree with you. The world we're in is complex. It's difficult. You don't even feel like staying in the same job longer than 1 year. Somebody, you know, disses you, you're quitting the job. And these are highly paying jobs that require great skills, but they're leaving these jobs to start their own businesses because they don't feel that they can trust the establishment or any of the institutions anymore. They're going to just, you know, make up their own business. And some of them are doing very well at it. But that means some of our institutions and our, you know, we're losing these resources because they all want to do a startup, but nobody wants to stay working in the organizations that we now have. So that's one of the things that's giving me pause, and I'm really thinking about how am I going to build trust? How am I going to help them to feel as though, yes, I'm your mentor? And it's not just, you know, a proverb that I'm going to give you. My grandmother gave me those proverbs too, but I'm going to give you a little piece of me and my life and my experience because I care about you and I want to invest in your future.
Wow. Thank you for that, Carleen. Well, you know, I think you gave us pause for a new session for season 4, which will be called Building Relationship Between Boomers and Millennials. I think that would be a great panel, you know, and it's funny how time flies. And I think it's just about time to wrap it up. I just want to remind everyone that next week, Fireside Chat, end of season 3, will be elder and spousal abuse. What can I do if an older adult is being abused? What are the different kinds of elder abuse and how to identify them and the reporting requirements? So I look forward and I hope everyone listening today will be back to join us for our final Fireside Chat. And I'd just like to end with the words of Lisa Cole, an amazing lady I met. She is primarily an educator. And, you know, she was, I think it was, I can't remember if it was York or Durham board, but she said she learned all the different roles. So she went and she did her principal papers, her SO papers, just to learn what other individuals were learning, and it sort of equipped her to change and to be a voice and see where the loopholes were in addressing anti-Black racism in education. And she also, in our discussion, she was underscoring the importance to ensure that we have Black bodies at all these different policy tables. So when I look at how we're going to look up at even self-care during turbulent times, I think one of the important things that as a community that we need to do is get at these tables where policies are being made so we can change, so the turbulent times are not so turbulent, and that we can have real impact, right? I listened to the wisdom from you, Carleen and Perez, and how important it is to have your voices at tables guiding, you know, not only policy, but people, and ensuring that we are in fact taking care of ourselves. Because, you know, one thing is sure, that we will pass away from this earth, but that we can somehow control how and the when of it, right? By making sure we practice healthcare and we, not in a selfish way, put ourselves first. But remember, as they say, when you're flying in planes, you have to put, when the oxygen masks are deployed, you have to put yours on first before you attend to your child, right? Because you can't pour into people if you're empty. So it's really important that you take care of yourselves. I hope that throughout the discussion, you got a lot of great nuggets and tips. I know I did. I learned so much from my amazing panelists. So thank you again, Dr. Carleen Mitchell Wilson, and thank you so much, Carez, and I hope that we will meet in person. I've never met any of you in person one day, and I'll be able to give you all a big hug because, you know, I as in Jamaica, my spirit tekuna. So thank you, everyone. Walk good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, I haven't heard that phrase for such a long time. Oh my goodness, that makes me feel warm all over.
Thank you so much.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment.